Hello, I'm the Dark Master, and welcome back to the Kirby Right Back at Ya Retrospective. In today's video, we shall be covering episode 38, A Novel Approach, or as it's known in the Japanese original, Read It! An Amazing Million Seller! This episode was released originally on June 29th, 2002 in Japan as the 38th episode, whereas in the 4Kids English dub, it was released on June 21st, 2003 as the 44th episode. This change was likely due to the reshuffling of other episodes as opposed to anything wrong with the episode itself, though some have said it was so that it could be released closer to the Harry Potter films, though this is unconfirmed, and the only source I could find it was like TV tropes, so I'm a bit hesitant to say that's the reason. As always, let us start with the episode proper now. The episode opens to a shot of Tiff's room. Nice to see that she's a fossil collector, kind of like my brother, though I am concerned about how secure that massive ammonite is to the wall. It kind of looks like it could fall off easily. We see Tiff writing a letter to noted author and role model Rowling. We'll talk about her when she appears later in the episode, as she has some controversy due to her nature. Tiff writes about how the author is such an inspiration that she wishes to become an author like her when she grows up. Truly a noble goal. The camera pans over to the cover of the book, which reads Pappy Potter and the Fool's Stone, which bears a boy that closely resembles Kirby, minus having, blonde hair, glasses, a witch hat, pointed shoes, and unusually long arms. He's riding a broomstick and holding a purple crystal that is kind of like the stuff from the recent season of Ninjago. Now, this is clearly a reference to the first book in the Harry Potter series, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or as it's known in the United States, India, and the Philippines, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Now, I like Harry Potter, and it is relevant to talk about it for a brief moment, as it just became more relevant in this scene. I do not and cannot give an in-depth discussion of the first book in its entirety, however, and will link a video specifically about that book in the video description down below. Now, as a kid, I read Rowling's work after having read Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, and the Little Terry Pratchett, and while I did enjoy the series, it's nowhere near my favorite fantasy book, though the first book is arguably the best and is essential reading for anyone who wants to write anything regarding fiction. In addition to being well written, the first book also sold amazingly well, with an excess of 120 million copies, and saw 6 direct sequels and several mediocre spin offs. Not to mention all sorts of licensed movies, video games, knockoffs, and a Lego theme that is pretty decent for a licensed Lego theme. Now, of course, Harry Potter being so influential in the early 2000s and late 90s, understandably, a lot of other franchises like Kirby would make references to it, and it's not the only one. Honestly, it's a pretty interesting concept for a Kirby episode. It does come with a little controversy, but we'll revisit that later on. Resuming with the plot, Tiff continues to read her letter aloud, explaining how amazing Rowling as an author is, with all her realistic characters, and is wondered how she did that so well. Tough laughs, asking if she really expects to get an answer, considering that Rowling is likely getting tons of such kind of fan mail, and says she's the most popular author in all of Dreamland, that she's probably far too busy writing books to respond. Tiff says it's fine as long as she knows how much she appreciates it, and puts a stamp on the envelope bearing DDD's royal face. Tuff says, regardless, it's a good story and asks if his sister can read more as Kirby looks happy. After the jazzy intro, we see a televised show of King Dedede dressed like a clown, beating the heck out of Escargoon, who is dressed as a woman for some reason. Dedede is watching this and laughs at his own jokes. Honestly fitting considering how much of an egotist he is. This is also where we see the first visual change between versions. In the Japanese original, on the bag Dedede is holding, kanji that reads chips can be seen. The English dub saw this airbrushed out. Honestly, I would normally have an issue with this, but it's so minor and honestly so small that it leaves no impact whatsoever on the episode. But it is something to worth noticing and talking about for a bit. Escargoon, resuming the plot, runs into the room to inform King Dedede that his show has a rating of literal 0, which, honestly, how is that even possible if he's watching it? Wouldn't it be like 1? Huh. Dedede crushes at the chips and demands an answer as to why his show is getting such low ratings, being unaware of the show's poor quality. He grabs Escargoon by the neck, and the two head out into Cappytown for this information. The pair sneak onto a farm and see both the farmer and even his sheep are reading Pappy Potter. Sneaking around further, they see everyone in Cappytown is hooked on the book, leaving the king utterly confused. Escargoon explains that it is a case of bestselleritis, when there is a book everyone wants to read, regardless of their former self. Dedede is aghast as we cut to Professor Curio talking with Chief Bookums and his wife about how nice it is that everyone is reading, with Bookums' wife saying, since reading the book, she hasn't turned on the television once, with Curio saying a good book beats watching TV any day. Dedede is greatly annoyed and says he wants to read the book, much to Escargoon's shock. We cut to Biblio's bookstore, where we see a large line of Cappies waiting to get the bestseller. Some of them run away at the sight of the king's arrival in his limousine, as the king and Escargoon barge in out of their turn. It is also here where we see the second and last visual change between versions. As we see in the Japanese original, one of the books in Biblio store has these black squares that 4Kids for some reason just airbrushed out. I might ask why. I mean, what's the purpose? It wasn't even text. So, like, what was the deal with that? It's so bizarre. Just one of the most inane forms of censorship in the entire series I've ever seen. Resuming with the plot, Biblio, the bookkeeper, in what is arguably his most significant role in the entire series, tells the king rather bravely that he'll have to wait in line until his turn to get a book. Dedede says wherever he is the front of the line, and Escargoon orders Biblio to give the king a copy. Biblio runs up and says all the copies are being held for pre-orders. Ah, pre-orders. What a terrible concept. Escargoon whispers to the king to use his charming talent to try and get what he wants. Dedede tries to do that and reaches out for a copy, saying, surely Biblio can just spare one. But the bookkeeper swats his hand away and says, rules are rules even for kings. Dedede then tricks Biblio with a claim of a flying giraffe, which distracts Biblio long enough for the king to grab the book and flee out of the establishment. Escargoon hands Biblio some money that weirdly doesn't have its number removed, which is rather annoying because in previous episodes they were removed partially. I did make a mistake in a previous review. Curse you 4Kids censors. Why are you so inconsistent? No! Biblio denies the bribe and chases after the two thieves, who escape him after ducking behind a house. The pair chuckle and dedede tries to read it, much to Escargoon's chagrin, hogging it. He looks confused and says the book has no pictures. Escargoon is shocked to see the king can't read, and he should be able to, since in just the last episode we saw him reading newspapers, and it's kind of weird that he suddenly just can't read at all. It's kind of weird. It is odd since this is really the only continuity error in the entire anime. And I mean, it's not really that big of a deal, but the fact that it's the only one means it's actually relatively noticeable once you actually notice it. Dedede angrily denies this, saying he learned to read before being expelled from kindergarten. I didn't think that it was possible to be expelled from that, but Escargoon smugly says, well, then read what the book is about. When the king can't, Escargoon takes the book and starts reading himself the book. Dedede pouts and says it's fine as long as he reads aloud so that they can both understand, claiming his eyes are tired. What an excuse. And Escargoon smugly begins reading. However, he then starts to get enthralled with the book, and Escargoon slowly stops reading aloud, much to the king's annoyance, and he hits the snail over the head. Fed up with this, Escargoon flees, with the king chasing after him throughout the town before the snail escapes him by jumping into a nearby bush. Dedede yells out for Escargoon to read him the story, while Escargoon gets smug in the bush and starts reading the book. Dedede runs through the town, desperate to find out what happens next in the book. He peers into a home and sees a family reading the book. He complains that they're not reading correctly, that being out loud, and he can't hear them. The peeping Tom pauses when he hears Tiff reading the book aloud. He looks from behind a building and peeps in as the camera pans over to Tiff reading Pappy Powder to Kirby, her brother, Folofala, and the Cappy Kids. Honey says that Pappy looks like Kirby, which causes the pink baby great pleasure, though Spikehead wisely reminds Kirby that the book is not about him. Tiff then resumes reading the story. Dedede is having issues hearing Tiff's words, decides to sneak through the bushes to get a better vantage. Peeking through the bushes, he catches the attention of Kirby and is almost caught, though he manages to hide out of sight, so that the Cappies and Tiff dismiss Kirby's warnings, telling him to be quiet. Sadly for everyone listening, Tiff stops, saying she'll read more tomorrow because, one, it's getting late and it's a long book not to be read in a single day, with Tuff saying no one in town has finished the book yet, which is interesting. I guess there are no speed readers here in town. This gives King Dedede a devious plan and he sneaks away. The Cappy Kids leave Tiff, Tuff, and Kirby for the day. However, soon her book is snatched by King Dedede's tank's robotic arm. She demands Dedede give her book back, and he says that he's confiscating all of Patty Potter's books. We then see that Dedede roam through the town, stealing the books out of the people's hands. Luckily, I guess, everyone is outside and nobody left their books somewhere else. Chief Bookums, the mayor, and Mabel are all greatly saddened, with Dr. Yabui particularly upset due to his old age and having to cancel a golf thing for this. We then see the king drive off in a limousine filled with the confiscated books. In the Japanese original, he makes a reference to Japan's anti-nuclear weapons policy. three non-nuclear principles. They are non-possession, non-production, and non-introduction. Albeit dedede says no writing, no reading, no possession. The English dub understandably removed this as, let's be honest, the nuclear policies of Western countries are far different than those of Japan, and they probably wouldn't get it. We see dedede even confiscate the remaining books from Biblio store and drive off, much to the poor bookstore's owner's lament. Driving by Escargoon, he even takes Escargoon's book. The snail upset as it was only at chapter 2. Dedede explains to the snail his novel plan. What a bad pun. It is then that we see the only cut scene of the episode, and arguably the most impactful change between versions of this episode. In the Japanese original, we see a large pile of Pappy Potter books being set on fire while a circle of Waddle Dees chant Dedede's name, which is the first time they actually speak in the anime, though albeit it's only in the Japanese original. They're completely silent as an entity in the English dub. Dedede pronounces to the Cappies that the Pappy Potter books are anti-Dedede and thus must be destroyed. Tiff demands an answer, as no one was finished reading the books. The king declares that they shall never know how the story ends. Professor Curio declares this terrible, with the mayor declaring him a complete dictator, to which the king declares his absolute authority and laughs manically as Kirby looks confused, as the camera pans up into the night sky and fades to black. Now, this scene has sparked quite the discussion among fans of the Kirby anime. Some have compared it to the widespread book burnings done by the National Socialist government of Germany in the 1930s and 40s. Others have made the claim that it is an allusion to the critically acclaimed novel by Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451, that featured book burning prominently as a theme. In fact, the title of the book is the temperature at which paper itself combusts into flames. And while both of those positions have their merits, I think the truth can be found by looking at the context as to what was going on at the time of the episode's release. You see, the Harry Potter books, from their very beginning, initially released in 1997, they have been a target of numerous authoritarians. During the late 90s and much of the 2000s, these types were mostly Catholic and other religious fundamentalist groups, to the point where the books have become the most challenged books in the 21st century, with numerous claims of them supporting the occult. Now, this might sound silly nowadays, but it really is sort of like the same thing that a lot of trans activists are doing to the books and to their author at the current moment of time. It's just that back then, they weren't trans activists, they were like religious fundamentalists, though their arguments were fundamentally the same. The English dub, in an attempt likely to avoid any such controversy among their audience of, parents, decided to remove it. Now, some have defended this action. Just to name an example, J Does Stuff said that the scene was odd and inappropriate for kids, but I would say that I think we underestimate how much kids can tolerate when it comes to this kind of stuff. I mean, there wasn't any blood. It was barely any burning at all. You don't even really see it for very long. I mean, for freak's sake, Zero from Kirby's Dream Land 3 literally bled blood as an attack to hit Kirby. So it's not like Kirby has done nothing dark in the past. To me, this scene really isn't anything spectacular for the pink puffball. Anyway, though, I think this is enough about this scene. Let's resume with the plot. Escargoon complains to the king, who explains that he has the last copy of Pappy Potter and that no one else is going to read it. Escargoon smugly points out how he can't read and will need to get someone else to read it for him. The king laughs and activates the enemy teleporter, which brings in the character of the week. This is Rowling. Strangely, who is only named in the Japanese original. You would think that they would name it in the English dub, but they don't. Now, she is clearly a stand-in for JK Rowling. She is voiced by Veronica Taylor in the English dub, and honestly does a pretty good job, and is known for voicing many characters such as April O'Neil from the 2003 installment of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In the Japanese original, she has two voice actors for reasons that will become apparent later on in the episode. These are Kazui Ikura, who is well known and also voiced Kaori Makimura from City Hunter, and the second voice actress is Yumi Nakagara, another successful voice actress from Japan, known for voicing Erd from Oh My Goddess series, that's a weird pun, isn't it? Both those voice actors do a wonderful job with this. Now, being a stand-in for JK Rowling and the subject of this episode, it's drawn quite a bit of ire from a certain segment of the population. And I'm not really going to go into detail about the controversy with JK Rowling and that group of people. I'll link two videos in the description that sort of explore that from different perspectives. One's by Tornado Creator, the other's by some other guy. And, while I do lean one way more than the other, I'll be honest, I just don't really care. But to those people, I have only four things to say. Firstly, this is a parody of J.K. Rowling's work. She did not get paid for this at any way at all. And even if she did, the series has been off the television since December 9th, 2006, meaning that even if she hypothetically got any money, which she didn't for the record, but even if she did, it's been nearly 2 decades. Anything that she possibly could have gotten has either become irrelevant or has already been spent and invested everywhere. This episode has no impact whatsoever on financially supporting her as a person. Heck, this episode was one of the only episodes that didn't even air on the Wii channel, the Kirby channel, which showed like reruns of the anime. This was the only episode to never show up on that, so any possible revenue is nil. Thirdly, if this episode is so bad that it's the only thing that makes your life miserable, then buddy, can I just say, even as a trans person, you are one of the most privileged pieces of garbage I've ever seen in my life. I mean, how can you possibly criticize anyone for being privileged when this is the biggest issue? This is the bugaboo. This is the problem with your life. Get some perspective for once in your life. Like, seriously, go touch grass. You feel the blades of grass between your fingers and tell me, does this really matter? It's a parody of a noteworthy children's author and an obscure anime based on a Nintendo game. Seriously, this doesn't really matter. And fourthly, the anime predated J.K. Rowling's controversial statements, so it's kind of silly to retroactively criticize it. The enemy sales guy introduces Rowling, much to Escargoon's shock. Dedede asks her to read him the book. Rowling, however, says that he must know that as a successful, busy author, she can only really read to a large audience, much to the king's chagrin. She then suggests that they turn the entire castle into a magic school, much like the book, and much to the shock of both the king and Escargoon, who are a little bamboozled by her request. We then cut to outside the castle's walls, where we see the Cappies protesting Dedede's book censorship, with them holding signs and Tiff demanding to get their books back, with the crowd cheering for the freedom of Pappy Potter. The sounds of triumphs play and cut them off as the drawbridge is lowered and Waddle-Doo announces to the crowd that anyone who wants to learn how the book ends or learn magic is welcome by the king, as the castle is now a special magic school. Yay! Tiff is surprised, while Tuff thinks it's one of Dedede's many tricks. Despite this, Iroh and the other Cappies are entranced with the idea and rush into the castle, despite Tiff again warning them. She turns to Kirby and the pair run after the crowd. The Cappies demand for the conclusion to the book and to be taught magic. As if to answer, Dedede waltzes in with a new college professor robe. Escargoon explains that they are the magic tutors. Tiff calls the hucksters out, with Tuff saying how can they trust them, with Dedede assuming them that he's got nothing up their sleeves, and Escargoon tells them to put on their robes. Meta Knight, Sword Knight, and Blade Knight watch from the shadows as we see the crowd seated in the lunch area, which is a reference to Harry Potter. Tuff is confused as to why they gotta do all this just to hear the ending of Happy Potter, while Tiff wishes she could make Dedede and the Escargoon magically disappear. Dedede then says that the author of the book shall be reading them the story, much to Tiff's and the crowd's amazement, as we see her introduce herself. Tuff is happy as it means that they can finally finish the story, while Tiff is amazed that the king was even able to get her at all. Rowling asks the class if they have any questions, and Tiff, being the biggest fan, does have some. She asks her if she read her letter. Rowling, however, seems confused and explains that she hates fan mail and has a warehouse filled with unopened letters, much to Tiff's sadness. Tiff then asks another question, which is what inspired Rowling to write her books. Rowling answers that nonchalantly she only wanted to do it for the money. And why else would she do it, she says. Tiff is a bit shocked by this, but goes along with it just because she doesn't want to start a scene. Spikehead impatiently asks how the story ends, as we see everyone plead with Rowling to read the story. She gives a cryptic answer and talks about how the characters fly on a broom is something that happens when we see King Dedede announce that everyone shall be given a chance to ride their own brooms, as we see Escargoon pushes by a cart of brooms, warning them to avoid the sort of pains that wood can do. The Cappies excitedly begin to get their brooms, with even Kirby joining in despite Tiff's warning. However, he is stopped by Escargoon, who says he'll have to sit it out. We cut to a scene in the castle's green space where we see the Cappies fly on magic brooms as their eyes begin to glow with an ominous green color, and as we all know in the anime, when there are creepy eyes, that means that bad things are about to happen. In the Japanese original, one can hear a minor key version of the Invincible Candy theme. It's actually really good. It gives off sort of this haunted vibe. It's a shame that 4Kids removed it, as it removed all other music from the Japanese original. And normally I don't say that because I think the music in both versions is fine, but it's really good here. And it's also a shame that I can't really show it off, as there's never been a clean version. But here's the cleanest one I could get. Resuming with the plot, we see the Cappies and Tuff enjoying the nice flight, and they are enjoying the experience and slowly being brainwashed. Tiff wonders aloud as to why their eyes are glowing and demands the king to explain the brooms, but he just laughs her off. Chief Bookums asks what the sticks they're holding are for. One of the Cappy kids says that it's used to hit the ball, with the mayor elaborating that the ball is hit through a circular goal in what is a clear reference to Quidditch, which is from the Harry Potter books. Kawasaki complains that they have no ball, causing Rowling to say that they'll have to use Kirby, much to Tiff's shock. Dedede runs up to Kirby and knocks him into the air. Then Gus bats him away as Dedede hits him again. Then Kawasaki, then Professor Kyorio, and Mabel dribble the unconscious Kirby. Even Tuff gets in on the act. Tiff realizes what is going on and tries to get the people to stop. However, Rowling laughs as she says that Tiff cannot break her spell, but then it is suddenly revealed that there is another. The real Rowling arrives, escorted by Meta Knight, and exposes the deception, which makes Tiff happy and breaks the people from their brainwashing. And Rowling explains that while there is a flying game in the book, Kirby is in fact not the ball. Dedede is annoyed at the deception, and Escargoon makes a snide comment as the crowd float down to the ground. Tuff asks if it's true that she wrote the book to be famous, which Rowling answers no. Ira asks if the money was the cause, and she says no again, and explains that she wrote the books to inspire others to live their dreams, proclaiming the power of imagination. How, no matter how bad things are, we can use our imagination to dream something better. It's honestly a really good message. The king looks annoyed while Rowling continues to encourage people to never give up on their dreams as they are the rock to a better future, which causes the group to begin applauding her with claps. This makes the fake Rowling enraged. Her eyes turn literally a deep red and she charges towards the real Rowling, intending to kill her. But Meta Knight, in what is one of the few times he decides to get physical, punches the faker straight in the face, sending them flying in the air. The fake Rowling bellows in rage and in a puff of smoke reveals himself to be the demon beast, Broom King. He is a giant anthropomorphic broom with an elaborate crown and a pair of boxing hands. In the Japanese original, he's voiced by Kazuo Ikura and is given the name Hokingu. He does a decent enough job, though it's actually a woman, so you can kind of tell. While in the English dub, he's voiced by the esteemed Eric Stewart, who does, honestly, a far better job in every single way possible. Overall, he's a decently designed bad guy, and pretty nefarious too. Everyone is shocked to see this. Rowling, in shock, says the imposter is a monster, while Meta Knight confirms the obvious. The Broom King says he'll show them, and in a clear reference to Disney's Fantasia, uses his powers to bring the brooms alive and attack the crowd. After a commercial break, we see them flying relatively effectively, sending numerous cappies flying as the king evilly laughs. He declares that he will sweep away all opposition, as Kirby is told by Tiff to suck them up. Kirby begins sucking and inhales one of the brooms to become... Cleaning Kirby, also known as Clean Kirby or Broom Kirby, depending on which source you use, which is arguably, not counting the anime exclusive abilities, the most obscure ability seen in the anime, at least when the episode was released, as this ability hadn't been seen since Kirby's Dream Land 3 all the way back in 1997, which was the same year the first Harry Potter book was released. I wonder if that was intentional or not. Probably not, though. The anime gave it a redesign. What was originally a bald Kirby, they gave him a little yellow bandana with cute little green stars. Indeed, not counting a cameo in Kirby's Triple Deluxe, the anime would be the last appearance of Cleaning Kirby until Kirby's Star Allies. This time he would bear a white bandana with green stars. Honestly, it's a really charming ability which made the transition to the anime well, and the transformation is just humorous as Kirby struggles to take control of a living broom. And, it's a Harry Potter reference too, so there's that. Meta Knight says it's cleaning Kirby. The brooms descend upon Kirby, mobbing him, and he appears to be winning as the Broom King laughs. However, Kirby regains his composure and bats the mini brooms away, sending them flying into the air. It is also here that we see the final change between versions. In the Japanese original, we see him shout, "Clean," when he attacks. The English dub removed it, which is honestly fine, because the less Kirby talks, the better. I honestly hate when he excessively talks. It's just kind of weird. Seeing his forces defeated, Broom King himself goes on the offensive and buries Kirby in piles of trash that he releases from his... I guess it's his legs, maybe it's his butt, I don't know. This knocks Kirby out for a time and he begins wailing on him with his handle. Tiff and Tuff express support for Kirby and encourage him, and he gets a second wind and begins fighting back. The two trade broom blows when Broom King does a mighty sweep that Kirby blows back at him with ease. The Broom King, realizing that the end is nigh, tries to fly away, but Kirby rides on his broomstick into the air and catches up with the sus imposter. Much to his shame, he is hit with the magic dust and sent flying before exploding as Kirby watches and the crowd cheers. Kirby returns to the ground and, with Tiff's help, asks to hear the rest of the story as the rest of the crowd cheers to hear the ending. Rowling promises to send replacement books to everyone in town. Tiff thanks her, and the author recognizes her, much to the girl's shock, and the author explains that she came here just to meet her because the letter was such an impactful one. Sadly, this celebration is cut short by the boisterous King Dedede, who wants an autograph from Rowling. Tiff points out how they were the losers who started this whole mess, while Dedede claims he was tricked by the Broom King like everyone else. Even Escargoon calls him out for his lies, which causes him to be hit aside. Despite this, Rowling is a good sport and signs the book, as Tiff says she hopes to be a writer like her. Rowling tells her to keep writing and one day she'll be really good. Dedede butts in to advise her to put more pictures in her next book. Escargoon tries to make a snide remark, but is hit into the ground by Dedede's mallet. Rowling tells the king to keep reading, and the king sadly looks at the signature and still can't read it. To be fair, I can barely read it too. Escargoon snickers while the camera pans down to the book's cover, which transitions into clean Kirby, and the episode ends. Now, let us go over the positives and negatives and my final thoughts. First, the positives. Firstly, the episode's plot was just amazing, even standing on its own merits while also being an homage to the great Harry Potter. Broom Kirby is well utilized for such an obscure ability. The fact that Biblio even got a significant role at all is kind of astounding, though albeit I don't really go as far as to say his inclusion here was particularly great. But I guess that's just because we get so little of him that sometimes people tend to consider it far more better than it really is. I still liked it, but I'm just saying that while that is a positive, it's definitely one of the lesser positive parts of the episode. Rowling, controversy aside, actually was a good character as she and the fake one highlighted the two ways artists approach handling fame. Either it goes to their heads or they remain humble in form. Another positive I found was that the Broom King is a particularly vile villain. I mean, he's not just the regular average Joe monster that just is attacking Kirby, but he also is slandering an innocent author, and that's arguably just as bad, if not worse, at least as a person who has respect for the R's creativity. Also, DDD was particularly cruel. I thought that his petty censorship really just highlighted the grossness of that as a concept. It is also here that the only real negative I found with the episode, ironically enough, was the censorship that 4Kids did. More specifically, I mean the book burning scene. Like, imagine how boneheaded you have to be to censor a scene that's about censorship. I mean, really now. The other changes were less negligible, but man. Seriously, censorship is a really big issue. I don't understand why people just can't get it through their thick skulls that censorship is bad and it shouldn't be tolerated. It doesn't matter whether it's a fascist, national socialist group or if it's like religious fundamentalist or if it's most recently the LGBT community. It's just kind of weird. You'd think these people would learn that censorship is bad. There was a guy, and I don't want to say his name because if I say it, people will just dismiss whatever I have to say, but issued this challenge to all the people who advocate for censorship, and it's never been answered. Name an instance when censorship, number one, has worked, and number two, hasn't impacted innocent people beyond the original target. It never works. It's always bad, and anyone who supports it is not to be trusted. Overall, this is a great episode, and I highly recommend watching it when you're going through the series. And it's just a really good episode, even if you ignore all the references. I am the Dark Master, and join me next time on the Kirby Right Back at Ya Retrospective. Subscribe if you'd like to see more of this, and have a wonderful day.